The Voice and Songs of the People Stopping a War by Carter Ware. The Vietnam War. The United States was involved in the Vietnam War from 1954 to 1975, lasting over 20 years. Many people were opposed to the war as they felt it was a war we had no business being in. And this is all while thousands of young American boys died. This war also had huge public implications since it was the first war since World War II to have a draft, which selected young American boys to go fight. Many people felt this war was different compared to the world wars of the past since it didn't quite have the same global implications as before. Fight against the war. This war led to massive protests across the country due to the public outrage that this was a war that we never needed to get involved in. We saw massive protests and rallies in capitals, places like universities, and public events all across the United States. Like many eras before this, music was a way to unite the people. Famous artists such as Bob Dylan, Buffalo Springfield, Rolling Stones, and Phil Ochs, and many others created anti-war/protest songs. These artists created a voice in songs for the masses to stand behind and created a rallying cry to oppose the government and end the Vietnam War. We will take a closer look at specific songs and artists that had a major impact on music in this era of protest. For What It's Worth by Buffalo Springfield. The song was actually inspired by the protests in Los Angeles of 1969 to stand up against police brutality, but was used as a rallying cry against the war in Vietnam as well. The lyrics encourage thought and reflection while subtly criticizing government authority. Its calm and soothing tone set it apart from other protest songs and made it popular with counterculture, civil rights, and anti-war organizations simultaneously. One lyric that really stood out to me was, "There's battle lines being drawn. Nobody's right, everybody's wrong. Young people speaking their mind and getting so much resistance from behind." This lyric really spoke to me because it talks about the battle lines drawn from governments and wrong created by those in power. And meanwhile, the youth of this country spoke its mind to end the war, yet the government still resisted them.
There's battle lines being drawn. Nobody's right if everybody's wrong. Young people speaking their minds are getting so much resistance from behind. Time we stop. Hey, what's that sound?
So let's dive in a little bit deeper about Buffalo Springfield, the band. While they were only together for a short while, this amazing band of artists formed in LA, California, managed to generate some of the best folk country music that kicked off the 70s. They had a major impact on music simply due to the joy they brought so many people, but with their songs For What It's Worth, truly united people of all races and all different backgrounds to stand up for what's right, not only in protest against the war, but for protests against police brutality as well. I'll talk about two songs written by Phil Ochs, What Are You Fighting For? And I Ain't Marching Anymore. Ochs wrote I Ain't Marching Anymore as the American involvement in the Vietnam War was beginning to grow. The song criticizes all of American military history from the perspective of a weary soldier who's been present at every single American war since the War of 1812. One lyric that really stood out to me was, "It's always the old to lead us to war, always the young to fall. Now look at all we've won with the saber and the gun. Tell me, is it worth it all?" This lyric stood out to me because it reflects on all the wars that the American government has been a part of. And it talks about and shows the countless of innocents that have died due to war from the American government.
Anymore die, but I ain't marching anymore. It's always the old to lead us to the wars. It's always the young to fall. Now look at all we've won with the saber and the gun. Tell me, is it worth it all? For us to anymore die, but I ain't marching anymore. It's always the old to lead us to the wars. It's always the young to fall. we've won with the saber and the gun. Tell me, is it worth it all? For I still
The second song that Ox wrote was What Are You Fighting For? As a way for people to hear his belief that what are the real reasons for fighting in wars while there's so much corruption and things to solve in our own country rather than countries abroad. A lyric that stood out to me was, listen to your leaders, the ones that won the race, as they stand right there before you and lie to your face. If you ever try to buy them, you know what they stand for. I know you're set for fighting, but what are you fighting for? I think Ock highlights how corrupt government officials can be, trying to speak his truth that government officials don't truly want what's best for us, but what's going to put more money in their pocket.
But what are you fighting for? And listen to your leaders, the ones that won the race, as they stand right there before you and lie into your face. If you ever try to buy them, you know what they stand for. I know you're set for fighting, but what are you fighting for?
To dive a little deeper into Phil Ox and his impact in history as an artist in this era and music as a whole. Throughout his career, Phil Ox participated in numerous anti-Vietnam War and civil rights marches, as well as performance at Carnegie Hall and Town Hall in New York City. He became well known for his fiery political beliefs, true humanism, sharp and poetic lyrics, and his distinct voice. In contrast to protests of civil rights singers, he saw himself as a topical artist. Following violent riots at the 1968 Democratic National Convention in Chicago, he referred himself as an early revolutionary, and over time he referred to himself as a singing journalist. Music truly was a uniting force in the era of the Vietnam War, and still is today. Music is a way for people to peek into the heart and soul of an artist who is trying to express the cry and outrage of people who are oppressed or against acts of violence. These two artists/bands truly shared a passion for expressing these emotions and gave the masses true rallying cries to stand behind and oppose the unnecessary Vietnam War.